Frances Reamer, and I'm so pleased to welcome everyone to Arizona Climate Conversations, video podcast conversation sponsored by Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance. NASCA is a local grassroots, people-powered movement in Northern Arizona. Our mission is to educate and empower people to take action against the negative impacts of climate change. In our podcast, we talk with folks in Arizona about environmental practices and actions. Our goal is to get the word out about local projects and initiatives that create solutions to the climate crisis and to share everyday practices that save our planet. We want people to feel empowered and inspired and to share and to act. We're so excited to talk with you about the ways people are taking power into our own hands, in our own backyards, and in our own practices and policies. Welcome. So today we're so pleased to talk with Nikki Cooley, co-manager of the Tribal Climate Change Program for ITEP, the Institute for Tribal Professionals. Nikki is of the Diné Nation from Shonto and Blue Gap, Arizona. She's a climate change activist, river guide, and a longtime steward of the Colorado Plateau. So Nikki, welcome to Arizona Climate Conversations, stories from our backyards. We're so happy that you're joining us. So.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let me just open it up. Can you talk to us about your story of climate change, how you got involved in climate activism work?
Frances, I think this is one of my favorite questions because I may have one of the more unusual answers. My work, so to speak, in climate and environmental activism started long before I was born. My grandmothers often told me that I already had prayers and lessons, ceremonies, and all types of knowledge that were already being infused into my being, of what was to become my being. And so when I came into this world, I was already working. I often walked long distances herding sheep in Shonto, and I rode horses. I even rode cows, and I also raised corn, squash with my grandparents and my parents, and I still do to this day. And so I was being taught, and I think it was being instilled in me how important the environment was. And I didn't know that was another name for it was climate change or climate justice work that I was already doing at a very young age. Around 8 years old, I believe I think it was 11 years old, I wrote a letter to some newspaper, maybe it was the state newspaper or the New York Times, about how important it was for our leadership to really look to, I guess, decreasing air pollution and whatnot. And that came from a lot of the coal-fired plants where my father actually worked at. And so I already had that long in me. So I've just continued that work that my ancestors had prepared for me. And now I'm carrying on their work.
You're giving me goosebumps, and we're just starting the conversation. Thank you so much. Yes, and I know you're from Shonto, and you're referring to the Peabody coal mine, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So do you know how's that going? It's been decommissioned, right?
Yeah.
So how was so you're from a family who both depended on Peabody coal, the extraction work, but at the same time grew up with this deep understanding of what it means to be on the earth, in the earth, right, with the earth. How's the decommissioning going? What's happening up there?
Well, I think things have just pretty much shut down, with the Navajo Generating Station and then Peabody Coal Mine, Kayenta Mine, Black Mesa Mine, they've all shut down. But now the decommissioning work, the restoration work has been very slow going. A lot of Navajo residents are still pushing these corporations to do the cleanup that they have promised to do, which they are not doing immediately, of course. But on the flip side, the folks that are still reeling from the closures of these major sources of income are still recovering, because it's when you have worked at an institution for so long and then to be abruptly shut down, or what it seems like to be abrupt, and you don't really know anything else, or you're having to start all over again. There's a lot of spiritual and physical healing that is taking place right now. So, and Francis, I'd like to use my father as an example. He's such a good man. He raised my family of 6 siblings. I'm the oldest of 7. So I helped raise 6 of them. But he worked all his life at Peabody Coal Mine until he was pretty much forced to retire a few years ago. And he used to have this cough all the time when he worked up at the mine. He was an engineer up there, which meant that he had to test a lot of the samples in the different pit mines. And he was always coughing. And then a few years afterwards, when he retired, he stopped coughing. And whatnot. So, and he's been to a lot of the climate change events that have been hosted here in Flagstaff. He's been to Bears Ears, educational events and whatnot. So that is quite a change, I would say, from when he never used to want to even discuss that kind of movement that was happening. I don't think he denied it. He just wasn't fully immersed in it enough to want to carry on a conversation about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that that money that will be going into green economies will really address new jobs, right? I think that that's also a big part of the transition, getting jobs to replace those very large coal mining and other articulated industries up there. Yeah. So let me ask you, now that you're working in an institutional capacity, right? You're with the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professional Tribes Climate Change Program. Correct. So how do you apply these experiences? How do you approach this, the being in an organization and talking about these issues? How do you draw on all of these experiences?
Well, I think it's really important that we have the leadership, with our directors. My director is Anne Marie Chischili, who's also from Shonto, and she used to be a water rights lawyer, but she really encourages us to really connect with our tribal environmental professionals that we work with, which include community members, different types of knowledge holders, and she encourages us to connect with them on a level that is respectful and allows them the space to speak their truth if they should have it. Because a lot of the communities that we work with across the country, including Alaska, there's a lot of healing that needs to be done, but also a lot of celebrating of even the small victories of a project that may, it could be as small as, changing out the propane tank and a little knob that's not leaking gas in someone's house, to a tribe that actually has some funding to hire someone about to do climate change work in their communities. These are, and so I actually do these types of things almost every day. And I really draw on my personal experience of growing up without running water, meaning I didn't have a faucet, to turn on water. I didn't shower. I didn't take a bath like everyone else that lives in urban areas that did that. And I grew my own food with my family, and I knew how to butcher a sheep if we needed food and whatnot. So, and I learned how to cook. Oh my God, I think I was cooking at 5 or 6. And so that self-reliance was really important. And so sharing these types of stories connects people to the work that you're doing, but also that they are wanting to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You put me to shame. I can't do any of the things that, well, I can garden a tiny bit, but yeah, you meet all the checklists for Miss Navajo, right? Because you speak Navajo as well. So
Yes. And you know why I never entered to being Miss Navajo? I mean, there's so many other amazing people more, I would say, deserving of the title, but I was really nervous about butchering because that is something that is taught at a very young age, and I am not a good butcher at all. I think that speaking Navajo language and telling stories about our origin is no problem, but butchering a sheep was probably the one that I was scared of.
that's what reminded me, because I know that butchering a sheep is one of the criteria. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So can tell us a little bit about what inspires you, what keeps you going.
I'd like to start out with the story about when I was giving birth to my oldest daughter, who is 10. Well, I only have two children. I have one's a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. But when I was giving birth, and as a mother, it was really hard to becoming a mother was hard to withstand that pain. Any pain I get now, I compare it to childbirth. But my my husband said to me, you know what? Thousands of your ancestors gave birth under a pinyon juniper tree in a hogan in the wintertime. And if they can do it, you can do this. You have it easy, is what he said to me. And I drew on that strength. And that was really what he said to me, really resonated with me. And every day I remind myself that I draw on the strength of my ancestors, including my grandmother, who's 90 something, and she's still hauling water. She tries to lift hay bales, she's still raising her own sheep and chickens. She's very independent. So I draw on the matrilineal I guess lineage and strength that so many Navajo women have. And so that I really do. And my mom, you listen to stories of people like Shonto is what I'm going to think of, his boarding school experiences, but also my mother and father have the same story too. So I have to rely on that constantly. Compared to what they have, I have it easy.
That's right. We are the sum of all of those women who came before us, and it's an important reminder what you just told us. So I'm dealing with a 90-year-old mom, and it's useful to understand how we connect with each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how they bring us into being, right? They are us.
Yeah, and we have to remind ourselves. We forget. We get so siloed into our lives in the moment that we forget that a lot of them came before. A lot of them came before us. So, and the trials and tribulations that they went through for us to be here. I mean, your mother gave birth to an amazing woman who is a professor, an author, an activist, and whatnot. So I think it's good for all of us to remind ourselves.
Yeah. So given that, then what are some of the sort of bumps in the road or the challenges that you've encountered in this work, in this what you're doing?
Well, I would say there's a couple of things that the bureaucracy that surrounds your work and the funding that you receive and the institution that you may be working at or working with, they have their own barriers because they have their own processes of how to help. They say help you complete your project. If I could just do my work and not worry about that, I would get so much done in the time that I would be saving from not dealing with that. And having said that, it's also about I think the energy of people can be overwhelming, whether it's negative or positive, because people want you to be part of everything that they're doing, and that's a compliment. But then there's a lot of people that try to also work against you in whatever passive aggressive way. I mean, that's the thing that I have encountered. Those two things. It's the work is, there's so much to be done, but with so little time. And then there's the negativity that people try to instill upon you because I don't, for whatever reason that they may have. And I'm sure you've heard this, you've asked this question when people have said funding you can do, but it's also, the bureaucracy, the behind the scenes that can prevent or slow down your work. So I think that would be my answer. It's a good question.
Yeah. So for folks who are involved in education and training or change through education and training, what do you know for sure? Or what are some things you learned to address paperwork, address the difficulties of interacting, getting people to think about new things?
I think, I hope I'm answering your question the way you want. I think it's getting people to understand that the work is worth it. You're going to go through these bumps. You're going to go through these things that are like quicksand to where on the path to where you want to get to. And that's going to make it a lot harder, but the work at the end is going to be fulfilling and it's going to be worth it. My husband, again, he's really amazing with his wisdom because he grew up on a farm in Iowa with all those old school farmers. And one thing he always says to me is chip away at it. It's going to seem really impossible right now, but chip away at it and you're gonna have a product that you're going to be proud of. And I am proud that I passed on that knowledge and that wisdom to a lot of the people that I work with. And I have to share that this one story of my friend up in the Tlingit and Haida in Southeast Alaska. He came to one of my trainings and I guess he heard me say something like that. He was like, Nikki, like 2 years later, he goes, I have an adaptation plan. I have a document that I created. And and he goes, it's one of the hardest things I've done. And I kept remembering what you said, just do it. Just keep chipping away at it. And he goes, Nikki, I did it. And I think that's one of the success stories that I have to say that came out of my wisdom, passing on that wisdom. So yes, that's a really good question.
I love that. I mean, I think the same thing, that when you're working on a new project, whatever it might be, with my students, I tell them it's a step-by-step process. You just keep moving forward step by step. And I forget that those steps that is what an articulation plan is, right? That sort of, how are we going to move that forward? Yeah. And making that process visible for people.
That's correct. Yeah. And you said you're a gardener, right? And so it's like when you're gardening, you plant that seed and you keep looking at it, morning, afternoon, and night. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, you have some greenery and it was worth the wait and the work.
Yeah. And you're tending it in different ways, right? Depending on its stage. So I want to move us in a slightly different direction. I want to talk a little bit about politics. We had the recent election, big changes around environmental legislative issues on the national level, on the state level. I think we're in a different situation, right? So what has been the talk? What have you been thinking about the effect of the elections on the work that you're doing?
Well, I believe the recent elections have really been supportive, I guess, of an administration that complements the work that we do at ITEP. It's supporting the fact that climate change is real and it's happening and we need to address it. So, and it confirms a lot of our work that we've been doing since 1992, which is ITEP, was created in 1992, but the climate work has just come to the forefront in the last decade and whatnot. So I think that's really important, that it's supportive of the work that we have been doing and are going to do.
Yeah. So a corollary to that then, because NASCA has a sort of a grassroots approach, right? So help us think about what's the connection between people coming together on solutions and sort of state, federal politics and policy? How do you think about that?
Oh, this is a really good question. I still think about this quite a bit, and it's important that the grassroots efforts and the state, the broader tribal work, at the government level, they have to come together, because the grassroots organizations are often on the front lines. And what I mean by that is those are the people who live in the communities. They visit the communities that are most impacted by climate change. They're most impacted by drought, lack of food, a good food, instead of depending on processed foods. It's really important because they are kind of the eyes into the communities, that at the state level and at the tribal government level, and even the academic institutions, we talk a lot about it and we can read a paper about it, but yet we're not the ones that are living it. So I think, for a good example, you're very familiar with the Black Mesa Water Coalition, Native Movement, and oh my God, I'm trying to name some others, organizations that are that are doing that type of work. They actually walk that talk. They are in there and it's relentless. Their work is relentless, meaning that they never go away. They never falter from their positions and whatnot. So it's really important. And then the grassroots level also needs that partnership with the broader institutions, because we may have some access, we have access to different resources that they may be unable to get, that they need. But also we need to listen to each other on that level.
Yeah, I love, that's lovely. I love that. And it takes me back to what you said before of the gas, changing the gas, or getting the gas cap, or getting the gas not to leak the gas cap, and then broader sort of economic, environmental issues. And to the person who's got the gas cap, that is more important than big issues. But the big issues affect the gas cap, right? And so thinking about how we articulate those is so important and so challenging. Yeah, and you've highlighted really, I mean, groups that are doing such hard work and have been doing hard work for a long time.
Right. And I'll mention one more is the NDN, NDN collective. It's a new organization that's really come up in the last year or so, that are on the front lines. I mean, Honor the Earth is also one of them, that they're on the front lines trying to stop line 3 of the Enbridge Corporation's efforts to put in the pipeline under the Mississippi. So it's really important that we listen, we learn from those.
Yeah. So I want to close with a question about environmental justice and your vision, your dream for environmental justice in Arizona, but in the broader region, of course, because we're part of a broader region, but in the broader world, of course, as well. So what are your thinking of, what is your thinking about, how do you think about environmental justice, and how do we engage in that path?
Oh, this is a big question, and I think I'll answer in the direction of, again, maintaining the position that all voices should be included. That means not just, the usual white men, our Caucasian men at the table signing papers, but it needs to be, I think, a holistic decision, to even have a woman, different gender, a person from a different gender there. And just to acknowledge that youth and elders are two voices that are really important to have at the table, at the discussion table, decision-making table. I don't want to just sit there and just hear what you have to say, but rather I want to be asked a question of, what do you think? How do you feel? I think you're doing it with this podcast right now. It's really important. But to maintain that position for forever, and really giving the rightful place to the marginalized races, people from different ethnic backgrounds, is really giving them that voice, but not just giving them that voice and platform, but also including them in these, there's some massive funding out there that goes to the same organizations over and over. And so I think we need to recognize and kind of diversify who we fund and whatnot. So, and I think it's controversial, but Amazon, I forget his name, the owner, has done that. I mean, he gave a lot of money to the Environmental Defense Fund, Nature Conservancy, and the usual folks that get these massive funding sources. Right. But he also gave money to the Indian Collective, which is, I was absolutely shocked by that. But also, I think I want to also mention that it's important that we put people like Waheela Johns, who's now the director of the Department of Indian Energy. That is so huge. When I heard that, I cannot tell you, Francis, how I sobbed with joy. I'm getting emotional right now. Waheela is she's from our community. Yeah. She is grassroots. She's also one that walks the talk and has made a successful business in trying to help provide a different source of energy to Native communities. But it was somebody you used to play kickball with on right. the reservation playgrounds made it that high up. That's huge, and I think diversifying as much as possible. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad you brought up Waheela because yes, her work has been tremendous, and her role in the Biden administration is to bring tears to my eyes. Absolutely. Yes. Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. Arizona Climate Change Conversation, Stories from Our Backyards. We are so pleased that you're part of our conversation. NASCA thanks you for all the work you do, and we look forward to ongoing collaborations. So thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, and thank you for giving me and other voices a platform to speak. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for talking with us. Join the NASCA community by signing up at nazcca.org. You can learn about volunteer opportunities in your community on the website. Act on climate change now.